Hey guys, so back in January of this year, word got out that Guild Wars 2 was going to have an expansion, and since that time, we've had information and news about that expansion slowly revealing to us. I currently record this video on the cusp of Heart of Thorns release, and pretty much everything about the expansion that there is to know has been given to us, besides stuff like story spoilers. So for the first time, we can pretty much look at everything the expansion has and explain what's truly important about it. So that's going to be my attempt here. I'm going to summarize for you right now over half a year's worth of constant information about whether this expansion is really something that you are interested in. And I know what you're thinking, my god, this is a long video, but bear with me. By the end, you will know everything that's important. I'm not going to do a deep dive on any specific feature, but for what it's worth, if I do say something that intrigues you, I have dedicated videos on each topic on my channel, should there be more you want to check out. So let's get into it. So I want to start things off actually with a totally new announcement they made just this week, but actually could be a huge draw for a lot of people who have tried the game out before and have felt like it was a bit too clunky or a bit too weird to play, or not quite close enough to, say, your favorite single-player action RPG. Guild Wars 2 was already pushing its combat away from what we traditionally see as hotkey-based MMO gameplay, and this has taken significant steps further still away from that traditional MMO experience. That feature's called Action Combat, and it's something you can toggle into if you like, which drastically changes camera movement, the activation of skills, targeting, the way in which we auto-attack, visibility. Basically, a lot of what defines how the combat feels has had a change for the better. Instead of now having to hold down right-click to move your camera around, your camera is always moving. It gives you the ability to zoom into first person and have a crosshair, and you can actually fire range projectiles almost like a first-person shooter. And it comes with a whole slew of other quality-of-life features, like snapping ground target abilities to allies or enemies for direct targeting of things. Basically, I know it's my plan now to, when I play Heart of Thorns, play with this new feature, because it definitely looks like a huge difference in the way that Guild Wars 2 runs. You should have seen some snippets of that footage in the background here, and generally just a huge left field thing that they've only just come out with is up to my excitement for the game tenfold. Moving on to some of the more basic things that we've known about for a while, one big feature of Heart of Thorns is the Revenant. This is the fabled third heavy armor profession. It can wield swords, shields, maces, axe, hammers, and a staff, but when it uses the staff, it actually gets to use the staff in melee, as melee combat, hitting people physically over the head with it, instead of as a ranged caster thing like we've only ever seen in Guild Wars 2 before. The theme of the class is that you channel past legends, so for those of you who are super into the story, you can commune with ultimate badasses and difficult bosses from the first game, who lend their abilities to you and allow you to devastate. Actually, the thing that most excites me about the Revenant is it's kind of a cool way to play a dervish once again, which was one of the Guild Wars 1 classes. What do I mean by that? Well, it gets a melee staff, and you can skin staffs to look like scythes. You can wear a kind of medium armor looking outfit and basically have your dervish back spinning around and kicking ass. The Revenant, the new profession, isn't the only big thing that's changing with the classes, though. They've added a new concept called Elite Specializations. What this does is it takes your base class and augments it, giving you new capabilities. For an example, if you currently play Mesmer, Heart of Thorns will allow you to elite specialize your Mesmer and turn into a Chronomancer, a Time Mage. What does that entail? Well, elite specializations give the classes new weapons they could never use before, new elite skills, and full complements of utility skills, including a new heal as well. On top of that, you get an entirely new trait line with more passives and selectable perks for that class that you never had before. And as Guild Wars 2 continues to develop, they're going to keep dropping elite specializations in the game. There is an elite specialization for every class with Heart of Thorns. So the Necromancer turns into the Reaper, a dark greatsword wielder that everybody is massively hyped about. The Elementalist turns into a storm-based sound mage called the Tempest. For the medium armor classes, you have the Engineer turning into the Scrapper, a drone and hammer expert. The Thief is becoming the Daredevil, a martial artist, another melee staff wielder with all these ridiculous dodge capabilities that transform your dodge roll into something entirely new with a different animation and different effects. And the Ranger is turning into the Druid, as well as getting a bunch of new pets for Heart of Thorns, but the Druid allows you to play a dedicated support character, which we'll talk about very soon. Lastly, for the heavy armors, you've got the Warrior becoming the Berserker, pretty much speaks for itself, as well as the Guardian becoming the Dragon Hunter, a bow-wielding big game hunter with traps. Even the Revenant, the new class being added to the game, also gets an elite specialization. That would be the Herald, which allows the Revenant to commune with one of the most important characters for the lore and the story of the expansion, a creature, a dragon named Glint. So that's the elite specialization feature. Next big feature kind of goes hand in hand with this, and it's what they're calling Masteries. So both Elite Specializations and this Mastery system are both ArenaNet's ideas for giving you late game progression. One of the biggest complaints about Guild Wars 2 when it came out was, where is the end game? What do I continue working on after I hit level 80? And these are their answers today. So what Guild Wars doesn't want to do is increase the level cap consistently, like you see in other MMOs, because when you increase the level cap, it theoretically invalidates old content as people become too powerful for it. It just continues bloating numbers to the point where people are hitting millions and millions, and it's really kind of arbitrary. What Masteries do is they allow you to unlock new combat and exploration capabilities that has nothing to do with just pushing higher and higher numbers. If you worked on getting max stats for a certain build on your character today, you will always have that. They're not going to take that away from you by pushing the threshold higher. So for an example, and the poster child of this system is gliding. You will learn when you go to Heart of Thorns and the new maps, you will learn through continuing to level up, basically, once you hit level 80, how to use gliders. When you first learn to use a glider, you won't be able to be on it for very long, you won't be able to do too much, but as you progress, as you continue to hone your skills in it, you'll be able to stealth while you're gliding, you'll be able to glide for much longer, you'll be able to glide for much faster, you'll be able to learn lean techniques to twist and turn your way around the jungle maps, which are specifically built for this idea of practically flying around. Gliding is everywhere in the new Heart of Thorns maps, but it's only one mastery. There are other masteries too, like learning to eat from different mushrooms you find around the jungle that will give you super speed, or other really prominent combat effects. They'll allow you to jump to incredibly high places, which then, guess what, if you've also mastered gliding too, you can then glide off from the heights. There are a ton of masteries, not just for the new areas, but for the existing areas too, like Super Auto Loot, which just vacuums items into your inventory once you've finally managed to max it out, or getting access to merchants that appear in specific areas of the world with totally unique loot. This idea of learning the languages of other cultures is built into the mastery system for the new areas and unlocks vendors in various places in both new maps and old. Now, as cool as everything I just said sounds, I personally am not as excited about Masteries as I am about the Elite Specializations, but they're both expandable systems. And so while gliding is cool for this expansion, in the future as they drop more Masteries in, we could learn how to do many other things like windsurfing or fishing and a ton of theoretical things that the devs have remained very tight-lipped on so far, but spell out great things on Guild Wars 2's horizon. The next important thing is raids. So this is an entirely new type of content they're adding to the game, and again, it addresses this question of what the hell do we do when we hit endgame, once we've exhausted all of the content here. Raiding is coming to GW2. So far, this game has only ever seen 5-man party sizes. Raids will be 10-man content. For those who still really enjoy the 5-man stuff, they're updating Fractals of the Mist to have up to 100 scales and changing the rewards that you find there, as well as adding a mastery for it. So they're appealing to both audiences here. But raids specifically are the big new hotness. I personally have experienced the raids. They hosted a beta in which we could get in there and experience the first encounter, and these things are incredibly difficult. They are the most difficult content ArenaNet has ever put in the game. They have done much for me as a player to redeem a reputation as a company that can create hard content. Until now, Guild Wars 2's really only appealed to those casual markets, and Heart of Thorns continues to do that, but for those of us who really want to play a lot, the game has always suffered. That's been a shame for me because the first game, Guild Wars 1, ArenaNet were well renowned for putting in incredibly difficult content and being unbudging when it comes to nerfing it and requiring players to basically get good. They used to have a real reputation for that and they lost it. With raids, they are bringing that back in my eyes. From what I've experienced with this raid, I spent over 12 hours grinding away on the first encounter of the first wing of the first raid and still could not beat the boss. So if you're looking for that ultra hardcore experience where you really group together with a bunch of your friends and complete the almost impossible challenges, raids are bringing that. The more important thing about raids though, and this is very important, is finally we are seeing more roles be useful in Guild Wars 2. So far, a big criticism of the game has been that for any of the content they've put in, DPS has always been king. There's been a little bit of support for one another, but often it's support that just means we can do more damage. We stack together on tiny little balls, pump out a bunch of basic stuff, and cleave our way through content, trivializing it. Does that happen with raids? No, the only raid groups, and there were very few people who managed to beat this encounter we have so far played, the only people capable of even doing this had to have a very healthy mix of different builds. You had to have condition damage players. You had to have flat damage players. You had to have, get ready for it, yes, dedicated support characters. Characters who could heal their allies up, and characters who could help the team by playing into various mechanics. You had to have a mix of frontline and backline characters. You even had to have a character who was essentially tanking and taking control of the boss. Now, don't get me wrong, there is absolutely still no hard trinity in Guild Wars 2. We are a million miles away from that, and so for those people who came to the game excited about that change, I think this literally just means more build diversity, and those of us who wanted something more specific to do on a character finally have the chance to do it. This stuff is super exciting to me. I'm really thrilled that PvE is finally going to a place where we see a huge variety that Guild Wars 2 has to offer in its combat, instead of just DPS all the time. Raids are one of the biggest selling points for me. Moving away from raids, let's look at some of the more basic stuff that's coming in this expansion. Of course, not everybody's going to want to be playing that. I want to talk about the story. Now, any of you guys know me, I am super into the story of this game. I'm very much into the lore. I've been following it very closely, and one of my primary reasons for getting Heart of Thorns is because I want to see that story progress. So is it worth really looking into? Well, absolutely, I'd say yes. Again, if you know me at all, you'll know I couldn't stand the default story of Guild Wars 2. I think they made a ton of mistakes, and generally many people were turned off of the personal story and bored by the original plot that they put in the game. Well, many of the issues that caused that boredom of the player base have been resolved. And so here's a few examples of what I mean. Number one, there are no more of these horrible side-by-side janky cutscenes that plagued the original plot at launch. The story is told far more dynamically. You're actually playing the game. Your character will speak and react to stuff as you wander around the jungle, will hold conversations with various NPCs, and note on important topics just as you wandered the jungle. Also important for the story that has won my love of it back is a new regard for the original lore of the game. It felt like with Guild Wars 2 they went into a whole bunch of new directions, and specifically some of the early streaming updates they did for Living World Season 1, they were ignoring what made the franchise so exciting with its old lore. Well, this story dives into that. Glint, a dragon from the first game, has a huge part to play in this expansion, and there's a lot of story and ties into some of those ancient races we all have wanted to know so much more about before. Arena have been very tight-lipped on the story so far, of course, to avoid spoilers, but from what we've seen so far, it seems like they're really going in the right direction, and what we saw them do in updates to progress the story before Heart of Thorns was even announced was a much higher quality than we'd ever seen before. As an example, the Elder Dragon, Morgemoth, has emotion. He communicates. You will hear the dragon talk. You will hear him laugh at you. You will hear him call to you, and in the end, hopefully, you will seriously want to kill him. So that's very exciting to me. The story, of course, is going to be taking place on new maps. Now, this was something I was a little bit worried about for Heart of Thorns. Essentially, what they're doing is adding 4 massive new PvE maps. Each of these maps isn't just kind of your regular style map you might already know about from Guild Wars 2, but it's got a kind of a mid-level, and then it has an entire underground level called the Roots of the Jungle, filled with deep caves and canyons and places, of course, for us to glide through. And high above the jungle floor is another huge layer to the map called the Jungle Canopy, again with lots of gliding and mushroom bouncing, where you'll be able to hang around in the treetops and meet the races that live there and have built cities there and towns and villages, as well as the ruins of an airship fleet that was shot down over the jungle just before the expansion begins. Despite that, how big these maps absolutely are, I have always been a little bit worried that the expansion would be a bit on the short side in terms of new explorable areas, but in addition to those 4 new maps we're getting, there are 2 immense guild hall maps which will be appearing on the world map as new maps too, And the raid content itself also take place on massive new maps. And so while you might originally hear 4 new maps, that's quickly going to expand as more raids and things are dropped into the game, and guild halls too. We'll talk about that stuff very soon. Now, the footage you see in the background right now is one of the new World versus World maps as well, which is being dropped into the game. And I haven't even mentioned some of the way that content has been changed in the new maps. For example, the new outpost system and adventures, which are kind of like mini games you can play that actually have PvE leaderboards, something ArenaNet never really wanted to play into before. Next big feature is to do with Legendaries. There are a lot of changes occurring here. So with Heart of Thorns release, there will be a new method of crafting precursors for your legendary weapons. So currently in the game, the only way to make the most badass ultimate gear in Guild Wars 2 is to either buy it from other players for a really ridiculous price, or to get a really high RNG drop, which is just not satisfying and unfun. ArenaNet have been telling us they wanted to give us an actual way to craft these precursors for our legendary weapons, a non-RNG way of obtaining them for years now, and with Heart of Thorns they have that system finished and it will be going in the game. The precursor crafting isn't just literally standing around crafting, combining materials though. They're essentially long quests. They will encourage you to travel around the world and actually participate in unique content and seek out various challenges. Along with the precursor crafting, just a matter of weeks after Heart of Thorns releases, new legendaries are coming in the game too. So the first 3, there is an axe, there is a pistol, and there is a staff. All 3 of them look completely ridiculous and badass. And not only do we have precursor crafting to do for those 2, but the actual process of once you've got your precursor of making it into a legendary also has this new system of questing and exploring the world and doing unique things. So for an example, the staff called Nevermore is a raven themed staff that has a raven perched on it. And when you equip the staff, it flies around you, it infuses itself in. It's the spirit of the raven, and you get all these birds flying around you. It's completely ridiculous and blown out. So to craft this staff, you need to go and find a raven egg. You need to cultivate that egg. You need to create an incubation kit and hold the egg inside it. You need to hatch the bird. Once the bird has been hatched, you need to feed it. You need to teach it how to fly and do a whole host of other stuff to eventually, you know, have this pet that becomes a part of your legendary weapon. It's completely badass, and we'll have people playing the game for a long time creating these new legendaries. It's no longer just about the final weapon at the end, but it's this whole storyline of cool stuff to eventually get it, and that's incredible. The final thing I really want to talk about for PvE kind of affects both the PvP players and the World versus World players too, and this is massive changes to guilds. This is, above almost everything else I've said on this list, on this video, the thing I am most excited about. I don't know, it's in top competition for some of these other ideas. These are the new guild halls we're getting and what you can do in them. Again, now, it's kind of stupid to think this way, but this is a game called Guild Wars, and it's never really been something that supported guilds in a really big way. So they've sat down and kind of gutted what is already in the game and changed a lot of things. The user interface for guilds is basically out the window and being replaced with something new. The functions we have available to us as guild leaders and guild members have been improved. The way that guild missions are ran has been changed, and more guild missions have been added to the game. There are new functions as well, like pretty much alliance chats. Now, this is the idea that you can be in multiple guilds all at once and communicate with all those guilds regardless of whether you're representing them or not. And we also have guild halls we can now finally get. So 2 will be coming with Heart of Thorns, more being dropped in later. And in these guild halls, you literally take a location of the world that is under control of the dragon, hire a bunch of NPCs as a guild, as a group. You hire NPCs to come in there, and over a period of 6 to 9 months, real world time, you build that guild hall up. You literally dig a giant mine into the terrain near your guild hall to collect resources, to build immense buildings that weren't there before. It might start with just a small supply camp, a little tent, and eventually you've got this giant golden arena that you can actually fight in. There are several buildings to every guild hall that you eventually build up that give you perks out in the open world. There's a portal you can create in your guild hall so that everyone can group up and you can tune that portal to different areas of the world to take you there instantly and avoid waypoint fees. These are the ultimate social hubs, and there is a lot of progression and gameplay involved in actually building them up and having this awesome place you can call your own. So specifically, even beyond the halls and the progression with them, there are 2 really important features coming with the halls. Number 1 is this arena I just mentioned. You will be able to play PvP, have 1v1s, duel people, and set up mini games in a guild-specific arena for yourself. You'll be able to change the terrain of the arena. You'll be able to play on the red team, the blue team, or the green team if you like. You'll be able to be on an invulnerable team. You'll be able to place objects that players can interact with. You'll be able to build mazes that people can fight one another in. Basically, this is a place that what big guilds can host guild versus guild deathmatch battles in. You'll be able to use this to test out your PvE build and your gear against another person's gear without having to worry about world versus world and all this other nonsense. Or you'll be able to build ridiculous mini games you play with your friends every day, just in this arena. I predict that this arena alone will absorb hours and hours and hours of some people's lives and could be all the content people play in Guild Wars 2. Think about Halo. Think about the addition of the Forge to Halo back during Halo 3, and you've probably got something very close to what arenas are in Guild Wars 2. That's not it, though. I just mentioned you can change the physical terrain and configuration of the arena. You can do that anywhere in the entire guild hall. So yes, the guild hall is a location in the world that you build these buildings up, but there is a decoration system coming into the game that allows you to wall off areas, build courtyards, and put balloons around. Basically what you'd come to expect of player housing in more recent MMOs like WildStar is being a big social thing that you could do in your guild halls. You'll be able to take a small section of a guild hall and declare it your own and put a bed in there and a few chairs and a rug and make that your special little area. Beyond this too, because of the decoration system, people will be able to create, works of art in their guild hall, make giant Terminator replicas, or even content for yourselves like jumping puzzles. Yeah, you can make your own jumping puzzles, large sky islands that people are required to jump around and see whether they can complete. This stuff is huge. This is renewable, infinite content just with the guild changes, and it's something that Guild Wars 2's needed for a long-ass time. Alright, those are the big things for PvE. I do want to talk a little bit about the other game types too, because they're both, of course, very important. For those of you who really care about PvP, you've not been ignored for this expansion. You have a new game mode called Stronghold coming, which is inspired by Guild vs. Guild, the original game type from the first game that was also popular. There are new matchmaking improvements, and you'll be able to choose whether you want to queue for Stronghold or for Conquest if you like the original maps. There are, again, with the Guild features, you'll be able to set up an actual PvP team for yourself, be on team-specific leaderboards, and a really important feature coming for PvP is divisions, actual leagues that will reset on a I think it's a 3-monthly basis, and you'll be able to climb through the divisions, prove how good you are, and eventually get PvP specific legendaries. There aren't just legendary weapons coming in this expansion pack, there are legendary backpacks coming too. If that's not enough, if you get high enough in the divisions, there is also a Pro League coming to GW2. And the prize pool for the Pro League, this means playing Guild Wars 2 PvP professionally for money. There is a $400,000 prize pool, which is kicking off for just the first half of next year. Lastly, for World vs. World, they are adding a new desert borderland with a different map flow, and again, there is a lot about World vs. World that integrates with the new guild features. A new crafting discipline is being added to the game called scribing, and scribes will be able to make machines of war, upgrades for keeps and towers and supply camps and locations in World vs. World, and send them to their allies in the mist so that you can use them to gain an advantage. So there will be the ability to call in airstrikes on people. There are these crazy new dune buggy motorbikes that you can ride around on. There is a new idea of these ridiculous, overpowered war banner things you can use to support your Zergs. Defense is being heavily incentivized, and specifically there's a new squad UI coming that allows you to have not just a 5-man party or a 10-man party for raids, but a 50-man party where you can see all 50 people in your group, in your guild, out there fighting in World vs. World. That squad UI is a huge game changer. It doesn't just exist for World vs. World either. Even extends to places in the real world, to the regular Tyria areas, where you'll now be able to have these immense parties and groups and be able to command people to go into different locations. It's really a huge change that should really spice World vs. World up. I think there's a lot to look forward to there. So that's Heart of Thorns. Or rather, that's Heart of Thorns exactly as it releases. But this is, of course, Guild Wars 2, and there will be continuing updates going forwards. And so you can kind of view the price of Heart of Thorns as this existing stuff I've just covered in the video, and a few things also. So to elaborate on what you're getting as the price as well for the next however long before the next expansion comes out, these are the extra things to look out for. We're going to be getting up to 6 new raid wings a year. And don't forget, these are big new areas that actually expand the explorable terrain of the map. up. We're getting new Masteries dropped in with those Raid Wings, so it's gliding with Heart of Thorns is a big one, and Mushrooms and so forth. We're going to get totally new Masteries as well, just as updates come into the game. They've confirmed that there is a rigid structure of at least 4 major balance overhauls to the classes that exist just before one of the PvP leagues goes live. So you get a big balance patch, you get 2 weeks to practice and play with it, and then the PvP league begins. There'll be other minor balance patches as well going on in the year. We of course have the Living World Season 3. 2 seasons already came out before Heart of Thorns. Season 3 will be coming. If you don't know how the seasons work, it's new story that comes into the game, proper playable PvE missions, new maps getting added, new features being implemented. There are 3 Legendaries of course at the start of Heart of Thorns, but with those Living World updates and just other updates, new Legendaries are consistently going to be getting added to the game, as well as new guild halls. All that stuff is absolutely confirmed to be coming, and there's a whole ton of other speculative stuff we could talk about maybe happening, but I'm going to keep to the facts here for this video. So there you go, guys. I've wanted to do this for a while. Hopefully this has been useful to some of you to decide kind of what's going on. That is what's truly important about Heart of Thorns to me. Hopefully you can show this video, if you already knew a lot of it, to some of your friends or people you're interested in getting into the game. They can watch it here, hopefully a reasonably unbiased, though excited perspective of how the expansion will go. Your support means everything, and if you do decide to get the X-Pack, there's a link in the description, which super helps me out should you end up using it. That's about that, guys. Have a great evening, and I'll see you next time.